All right, welcome to Strong Dads. Hey, this is Merle Hutchinson and Kyle Crawford. Kyle, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. Awesome, glad to be here.
Yeah, your eyes are halfway awake, so
I just got up this morning, so
coming off that
I'm
night
excited.
shift.
I
Yeah,
got a whole week to rest, so that'll be good.
yeah. I don't even want to hear about that garbage. Like, yeah, that's a different story. Anyway, that sounds good. Hey, we have a special guest in the house today. Our guest is Aaron Negangard. Aaron, how are you doing?
I'm doing great.
All right, good deal. Aaron is the Chief Deputy for Indiana Attorney General. Aaron, what is that?
So basically, the number 2 guy for the Attorney General's office, and in addition to trying to implement Attorney General Curtis Hill's vision for the office, we oversee all the defense of all the claims by the state. We pursue all the legal interest on behalf of the state. For example, we're currently looking and have filed a case against Purdue Pharma, who's partly responsible for the opioid epidemic.
Yeah.
As well, we also have a division that we don't talk about enough. It's the unclaimed property division, and we return over $1 million a week to citizens.
Maybe you need to tell me a little bit more about that. I'm sure I've got something out there that's
yeah,
not
you
claimed.
just go to Unclaimed, look it up on the internet, Indiana Unclaimed, and you put your name in, and it'll tell you if you have some unclaimed property.
Okay. All right. Will it tell me if I owe anything? Because I
No.
really don't. Okay.
Just tells you.
That.
No, it just tells you if you have some property, and you'd be surprised. I had $21 when I first came into the office, but
Oh, that's funny.
when you think about government giving $1 million back a week, it doesn't happen
That
very
is
often.
crazy.
So
That's
a rarity.
A million a
a
week.
million a week.
Wow.
$1 million a week we average.
Wow. Yeah, that's just from money that was sent, miscollected, or
Miscollected. Let's say you had money that you paid on like an electric bill, and then you moved,
I
and
see.
there was a balance due.
Yeah.
Companies are required to like turn that in, and then after 25 years, the state takes it. So that's the state's
That's
interest.
how it gets there.
But our goal is to see that it gets back to the citizens, and we've had a lot of cool things. Like we returned a Medal of Honor to someone's granddaughter.
Yeah.
So it's a really neat program with the Attorney General's office that I really wasn't aware of when we first started.
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
Wow.
Well, hey, Aaron, I do thank you for joining us. And the reason why we've invited Aaron here is not just because of his title, but this is, of course, our Strong Dad show. And our show is all about being a strong dad in today's society. And Kyle and I have worked to try to open the door to this conversation about why we need our dads strong and in the house and doing what dads are called to do. And that's everything from being good husbands, being providers and teachers and disciplinarians and all those things that we've talked about in previous shows. And so, Aaron, you bring some different components to this in terms of you actually get to see from your work a lot of what happens when society doesn't work well, right? From the legal aspect and that type of thing. But if I could, for just a second, I would like to know, and I'm sure our listeners would like to hear a little bit about you personally, I've known you for a while and have a lot of respect for the man you are outside of your office. So tell us a little bit about your family background, your wife and kids, and maybe even your dog. I know your dog a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I was born. I'm from Dearborn County. I was born and raised here. I did end up living in Ohio for a brief period of time.
Oh, do people know that? Is that something you're allowed to
I'm
actually
allowed to say.
Hey,
that's right.
don't forget that.
Most people know that, and I graduated from Ohio University for undergrad. Then I went to IU for law school.
Okay.
And came back here. My parents died when I was younger, but my grandparents still lived here, or most of them, and so we came back here. Had a career as a prosecutor here, a career I very much enjoyed. In the meantime, I had my wife Audra and 2 kids who were raised here, graduated from East Central, and My youngest is off to college, and my oldest is currently at college.
Man, so you're getting ready to walk into the old empty nest syndrome here.
Yes, and that'll be a new transition, and
well, you
one
tell
I'm
me how
looking
that
forward
goes,
to. Well, you were an empty nest.
Yeah, I wasn't smart enough to keep it. No, yeah, we've talked about that. So it's actually an exciting time. And Kyle, you're just a few years off. Yeah. How old's your youngest?
My youngest is 4, oldest is 6.
Yeah.
So I got a few years for that.
Yeah, so we're kind of all in different stages right now. But I've been through the empty nest thing. It's a very cool time. But as we were talking a little bit earlier, the worry doesn't really go away. They just come with different sort of issues and problems now. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and I think when you think they're younger and you get them to a certain point, you worry less, and then what you find is you just different set of problems, different set of challenges, and it doesn't stop.
Yeah.
The sleepless nights still occur.
Well, the magnitude, I think, of the problems is bigger. I
Sure.
mean, it's one thing when the kids stubs their toe or whatever. Now a toe stubbing looks more like, they get left out of a job or they don't have a place to live. Or
I really appreciate this encouragement. This is good. This is what I can look forward to. I This is good.
You'll do just fine. Yeah. Okay, and so your kids are off to college now, and so I know that you guys, since you've taken this job up in Indianapolis, you're actually looking to purchase a home up that way, right?
Yes. So we're in the process of moving right now. When I took the job, I just went up there to work and then would come back here. So it's been a difficult and challenging transition over the last couple years. But at the time, my oldest was getting ready to go off to college, and my youngest had just a couple years left in high school. So we decided to ultimately to stay here, and since my youngest is now graduating, it'll be nice to live in the same household 100% of the time instead of part-time.
Yeah, and not do quite the commuting that you're doing right now.
Correct.
I know that's not been easy.
No, it has not.
Well, that's good. So let's talk a little bit about the different I'm going to jump to your job for a second, and then we'll go back to how you go about that job from some of your upbringing. So in your job as working with the Attorney General office and everything, you are directly involved with a lot of the regulations and laws in terms of enforcement. Is that right?
Correct. I mean, as I said, we represent the state in all its various interests. And we don't represent on the criminal component, except in the appeals part. Prosecutors in our previous handle the prosecution, but of course I have a lot of experience in that as well. And then we handle it from the appeals end. But we defend DCS, the Division of Child Services, so we get a first-hand look at all their issues. We defend, as well as we defend DOC, the Department of Corrections. So, and a lot of initiatives that we've started, we've been really working on. Crime prevention is an initiative for this Attorney General, and we've helped support the 10 Point Coalition in Indianapolis, which is a very successful group that targets youth violence. And we're also going around the state talking to various groups. We just kicked that off. We got a 14-city tour. We just kicked off the first one in Fort Wayne a few weeks ago, talking about how do we keep a young child from becoming into the criminal justice system, right? At 10, 11, 12 years old. What do we do to prevent? Because, I mean, we always talk about our prison population and all that stuff, and I think the prison population is not a good measure. Is it too high? Yes, but you don't lower the prison population by letting bad guys out of jail early.
Right.
You lower the prison population by having prevention programs to prevent them from getting into the criminal justice system in the first place, and having programs for when they get out. And that was an initiative recently supported at the federal level by President Trump, and it was a bipartisan thing. and they really about adding more programs, because most people are going to get out of jail or prison. Not
Right.
everyone's going in forever.
For life, yeah.
And so what can we do for those people who are getting out so that they don't come back into the system? And
Yeah.
Dearborn County has a model program that we've been talking about throughout the state called the Jail Chemical Addiction Program. So there's ways it can be done. It requires an investment, it requires collaboration among public health entities, as well as law enforcement agencies and other
Yeah.
government agencies.
Well,
But it can be done.
Yeah, so I mean, you definitely just kind of hit a string with me, and that is the preventative side.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's what Kyle and that's what Strong Dads is about.
Yeah.
You can probably tell us better. We've read and even had some of the stats on our show before about the rate of incarceration with kids who grew up without a father in the home. Yeah. And
Right.
I mean, what are you seeing in this population? And again, as we've said before, this is not a government problem,
No.
right? It's just you're seeing the symptom, right, of a much deeper problem.
Sure.
Well, absolutely. And if you look at the percentage and of fathers not in the home, that is a huge indicator, male or female, as to the type of problems that child will have.
Yeah.
Now, this is not to say or belittle or any way begrudge single parents and what they have to overcome.
Absolutely not.
And there are some great single parents out there, but they, no question, have a tougher job.
Oh yeah.
Right.
And because of that, the lack of a father in a home can be, or in the person's life, can be a huge indicator, and it creates extra demands upon the single mother, and that is something that we look at. So what can we do? You know, and General Hill, when he campaigned, he used to tell a story about his dad being his hero. And then he'd say, you know, and I didn't want to disappoint my dad. He says, if there's not a father in the home to the kid,
Right.
and there's no one for that person to look to not disappoint, then what happens?
Yeah.
First off, they're lacking that guidance. But secondly, they look to someone else. And that someone else could be a gang leader, a drug user, and then what can I do to make that person so that person's not disappointed in my
Right.
life? And that's where those bad decisions fall. And again, it's not intentional, but it highlights the need to have strong dads in the home,
Yeah.
or involved in the child's life, so that person has a relationship with their father, and that is that person they don't want to disappoint.
Yeah.
And that's really cool, because I know early on in one of our earlier shows we talked about, you know, for my profession, a lot of what I do as a firefighter, we do is, you know, retroactive after the event has happened. And it's really cool to hear you, Aaron, talking about, you know, the steps that you're taking to be proactive in the epidemic that we definitely feel is going on in this country with the father, the absence of it, and, you know, deeper than that, you know, with drug issues. The fact that you guys are diving at that head on is really cool to hear, that you're taking that stance, that you know, the profession that you have, you get the opportunity to kind of to do that head on. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I think a lot of what we talk about in this show is we refer all the time is to the generational effect.
Yeah.
And what we do in the moment sometimes seems to be the quick fix, whether it's a guy who's just frustrated or bothered by life or whatever, and he leaves the scene of the home or whatever. So in the moment, it seems like, you know what, the heck with it. This is where I'm going, you know, or this is what I'm doing. What we see is the generational effect that now, and I've dealt with child services quite a bit myself, and see that we can't even just go back to these kids who are in jail right now, because we can actually learn from who they came from. And most of these kids came from fatherless situations, and then we go back and we find out they came from fatherless situations.
Yeah.
And so the generational effect is now something that we don't really have to debate. We don't have to argue. We can go, wow, this is pretty clear. So Obviously, Strong Dads is a podcast trying to work on this issue, to educate, to encourage dads and moms, right? To hold on to that dad and encourage him, keep him in the program. What do you, Aaron, is there any initiative or movement going on from your level at the state to help encourage better fathering or connection to families or anything like that?
Well, what we're trying to do is use the position in the Attorney General's office to facilitate and bring groups that are addressing these issues together. And then we want to be like a clearinghouse where we can provide that information. So the end game is to have like a website where someone can go to and say, okay, what's going on in Dearborn County, and can see the names of various groups, and then highlight group programs that are working well to address those issues.
So this would be like pulling together both community as well as faith-based programs, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
absolutely.
We don't need to reinvent this wheel, do we?
No, 10-Point Coalition is a faith-based program, and there's no question, and that's why government has accepted this notion of faith-based programs and the success of those programs. So yes, absolutely, I think that's a vital component. I know it's very important to General Hill and myself, and we think that's a vital component of a lot of these programs.
Yeah. I think one of the things that we have to be careful with is trying to ask our government to create a new program.
Correct.
Because that's totally opposite from really what needs to happen. The program needs to be the family, right?
Absolutely. Government's very bureaucratic. I mean, I've learned that just, in a couple years.
Yeah.
And we don't want to grow the bureaucracy in an effort to solve the problem, because then at the end of the day, it still is a bureaucracy and won't be as successful. What you want to do is create vehicles where people are empowered and then what can you do to help educate the people so that they can do, because lots of people want to do some things. Maybe they need a game plan. And that's kind of the goal, but it needs to be, and you have to look at long-term sustainability. Long-term sustainability of these programs is dependent upon it being a grassroots movement, right? Because these things can't be sustained by small groups of people forever. And it needs fresh meat, for lack of a better term. It needs new blood.
That moves in and has the belief in it, right? You got to have that belief that it's that important, and I think that's probably some of the confusion that we had. Like, we just didn't value family in the last 30 years like we did maybe the previous 100 or thousands of years. And so the value of family, and again, we can get into why that's happened, whether it's lack of opportunity or lack of the proper laws or whatever, but I think highlighting that there's a problem. And then, one of the things that we always talk about here is, okay, so what can you do about it? I mean, meaning like Kyle and me and you, what can we do about it? And I think our first start really is, you don't have to look anywhere but your home.
Correct.
This is not we have to go out and travel to do. And it's one of the reasons why at Rock Solid Families, we're all about ministry work, but there is a huge ministry in need in this country. And as well as it's great to go to Haiti and other places. And again, don't get me wrong, I've been there, and those are great works that are going on. But we are at an epidemic level of crisis in terms of the deterioration of the family. And so this is actually a very easy solution in terms of where we start. And we start in the home.
And it's cool to hear that some of your initiatives that you guys got going on, Aaron, are faith-based, that the churches are stepping in and assisting with that. Because a lot of times, that person, I think we would agree that a lot of times, we look to the government to fix the problem, and that's a perfect opportunity for the church to step in and assist those families and kind of wrap their arms around those families and walk alongside those families, similar to what you guys do here in Rock Solid Family. Walking alongside those families and assisting them in a much more intimate way than what the government can do.
Right. Well, and I think, as you just said, Aaron, I think where we get ourselves into problems is a government program can jump in, but will it be sustainable?
Yeah, that was a good
right?
point.
So we could start this and get it rolling, and it all looks good on paper for 2 or 3 years, and then all of a sudden, elections come, people change, ideas drift, and the next thing you know, we don't have the program that we did, and so that's why the family unit being so strong, and then of course the church is being grounded in a foundation.
Absolutely.
We talk about that the reason why the church is carrying a vital part to this is because its foundation should not be changing as rapidly and as crazy as our political landscape.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, and it needs to come from the organization, and then to the extent the government can help support that through grants or whatever is fine. But what happens is, politics being politics, people come in, they want to put their name on it so they get credit for the benefit. Yeah. And then, for a couple years you got something going, but then that person gets beat or it didn't work out, and then that brand is targeted, and it's like, and it's not rocket science, a lot of this. I mean, we know what needs to be done. It's just a question of execution and having a commitment towards the resources to get it done. And again, government is not going to ever be able to replace the lack of a father in someone's home, but we can do things to help bring other people into play to help be that father model, or that that father figure. And an example, a friend of mine, or my son, sent me an article on a friend of his from college who had a really tough upbringing. His dad had died from drugs when he was very young, like 7 years old. And he was bitter about that, but some people in the church stepped up and came in and started taking him out to eat for his birthday, and and helped him along the way, and then that brought him to Jesus, and that brought him to understand faith and God, and now he's in the IU Army ROTC program. He wants to be a doctor.
Cool. Yeah.
And he wants to be a doctor because he wants to help both military and civilian people be healthy.
Yeah.
And here's a kid who could have easily gone the other way, but people stepped up, and because they stepped up, they helped keep this kid in the right path. And that's the kind of things we need to look for. And we don't need something that's, no program's going to be all things to all people. You need to have a targeted mission, and just saving one person at a time. I mean, it doesn't have to save the whole world. It's that whole seashells or starfish story. You're throwing, there's a pile of starfish, and you're throwing you can't get it all done. Well, but it makes a difference to the ones we get back in the ocean, right?
Yeah.
So I look at that too, because the problem is insurmountable sometimes, but we can do it, one life at a time, and that makes a big difference.
Yeah. I mean, I think as we talk about this, you think about, well, how big is this problem, and can we even get our hands around it? And I think if you start thinking that way, you become overwhelmed, and that's why people go, "What the heck? This is, the hay or the cow's out of the barn now. We're never going to get it back in." And it's not. Yes, that is the case. If I look at it from 30,000 feet and I see, whoa, everything's running crazy. But if I just are focused on what I need to do with my family, and that's why we want to encourage dads that are out there. Hey, you know what? The first thing that you need to do is understand the value of your family, and we do that through our wife. Right? Yeah. I mean, as a man, the way that I show my kids that families is important is I value my wife. Yeah. And when I start to value my wife, the kids start to see the value in what we have. Yeah. And that's a tough thing to do, because as soon as the value of my wife starts to deteriorate, our relationship goes down. When that goes down, there's a divorce probably that's going to play out in our future. Yep. When that happens, all of this stuff that we're talking about here starts to happen. So we want to encourage guys that out there, hey, if you're going to get in a relationship, you get in with a commitment to this woman. Yep. And we've talked before about, living together and all those things. And, on the surface and the way of the world is, that's no big deal. Try the car out before you buy it kind of thing is what we see. And it's like, no, you've got to have an absolute commitment to this lady for the sake of your kids so that we aren't going down the criminal road that, Aaron, you get to deal with on a regular basis.
Right.
So,
I agree.
Yeah, so this is it's good stuff, but let's talk a little bit about how you approach your work from your own upbringing, because obviously you come in with not just your educational background, going to law school and all that, but all of us have a bent on how we see the world, and usually is bent from our upbringing. Mine's broken most of the time, but it's So how did your upbringing influence how you look at your job today?
Well, my father was an excellent role model. I mean, he died when I was 20, but he was an example of, he was a great father, and I don't feel shortchanged at all because I had an excellent father. He taught me the value of integrity, taught me the value of hard work, taught me the value of getting a good education, and discipline. And so I tried to emulate those things when in raising my kids. And
So let me back up for a second. So he passed away when you were 20.
Yes.
So you were still you were old enough to know the man that he was in your life, but yet you were still young enough to be a 20-year-old and still had a little bit of that wildness, like, okay,
sure.
I'm trying to live life here. So how did you have an active thought process of, okay, I'm going to live to make my dad proud, or did you just go back on it later in years to say, okay, hang on, I need to start thinking about what my dad did?
Yeah. No, I think I didn't always meet his expectations, but I think from early on, you want to meet your father's expectations.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's ingrained that way for a reason. I mean, I think it's deep in our wiring and our software, so to speak, to want to, and that's the problem, and that's why the importance of having a strong father figure. And so from early on, my goal, was I wanted to make my father proud of me. I wanted to pursue what interests me, and he helped encourage what interests me. He didn't say you should be interested in this. I was expected to do well in school. I was expected to work hard. I was expected to follow his rules, or the rules between him and my mother. And he was, my father and mother were very close. They had a great relationship. And so, all that, became wired in my software, so that I wanted to emulate that and wanted to, push my kids where appropriate. But then, also show the appropriate level of grace. That's another challenge because, they're not going to meet your expectations. And I set high expectations because high expectations gets good results. But by the same token, they will not meet your expectations, and they will make decisions that you're thinking, why? What have I done that have caused you to do something along those lines? And you certainly have heard the opposite from me, so what was it? And then you think and then you think about our Father, the Father in heaven, and how he's looking at you saying, why did you
when you're all
fail to meet his expectations? And so then you're like, oh, maybe there's a lesson here for me. And I think that's important in understanding the father-child relationship. And I'll tell you, too, faith was very important to my parents. And, I grew up in the church, going to Sunday school every Sunday, and, that was expected. And so that, that taught me a lot as well.
So when you deal with the work that you do, and the criminal aspect of guys that are incarcerated and that kind of thing, where do you see is faith completely dead, or do you see guys grabbing back into faith when they're in these situations, or is it I know sometimes we talk about people have jail faith or
Yes.
that kind of thing. What do you see there?
So I think it's a combination of almost everything that you were indicating. I mean, there are people who while you're in jail or prison, you gravitate to the message.
Yeah.
But I think some of them are gravitating to the message out of their own self-interest,
Sure.
in that it's not sincere.
Whatever I can do to
Whatever I can do. Look,
get out of here, and
it's not,
yeah.
and it's just honest. But a lot of the people who spent their life in and out of the criminal justice system are very good at manipulating people and
Sure.
the people around them.
Mm-hmm.
So they almost adapt to it naturally. What do I need to say to get to the next level? And so we used to joke, well, if you're looking for Jesus, just go to jail. I'm sure you'll find him there. But
Yeah.
he may not be leaving with them.
Yeah.
That being said, some of the biggest transformations, or the biggest transformations that I often saw, were generally someone who had legitimately
Yeah.
found
Total.
Jesus and had taken that faith to that level.
Yeah.
And one of the things you look for, if they're asking to get out of jail early because of their faith, then maybe because if you're really interested in serving Jesus, you can do a lot of it there in jail, because there's a lot of lost people.
Yeah.
But that takes a lot of courage to say that's someplace you want to stay.
Right.
And so, but you do see it, and you see the biggest transformations in the ones that really start to live it.
Mm-hmm. It gets me back to thinking about in order for us to become a follower of Christ, you have to really humble yourself. And I think part of being a good dad is teaching your child to be a good follower. And we've really, in many ways, mixed this up in the way that we've taught, your kid is the leader, he's the top dog, he's everything, and he doesn't need anybody else. And when you then take the dad out of the picture for reason of divorce or whatever, the only way that kid survives is to artificially pump his chest out and act like he's something that he's not. He becomes hardened, tough, arrogant, full of himself, selfish pride, and that's a recipe for disaster for a lot of these kids. And once they start thinking that way, that leads them into the criminal world, because obviously when you think you've got it all right, the police officer is going to quickly, pull you back in line. And so I've worked with a couple of the guys that have been incarcerated, and like you said, to truly see a man humble himself, whether he's incarcerated or not. And I think that there are plenty of men who are not incarcerated that still have not experienced the humiliation that it takes, the humble heart, to be a follower of Christ. But once you do that, you really don't have to have that hardened, chest out, arrogant attitude. It's a really freeing kind of thing. And I just wonder how, if a man can be humbled as a teenage boy, we have shared that our boys had in common wrestling.
Right.
And we loved wrestling because our boys got their tail kicked.
Right.
Right?
You were going to be humbled.
You were going to be humbled. And there's no such thing as an arrogant wrestler for long, because he's going to get his butt kicked, and he's going to have to realize, whoa, I'm having a hard day. Yeah. And so as part of the parenting thing, I know I did not feel like I needed to work extra hard on the humbling, because we exposed our kids to areas that they were going to be humbled. Yeah. But then empower them, right, to get through them, to get through that, encourage them.
Right. So. And that's what I did like about wrestling for those reasons, because it is, it requires mental discipline, physical discipline, and it's like life. It's going to humble you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that happens for a reason. It's all part of building our character. God's going to humble you if you aren't humble. If you're not there, something's going to happen. I've had it.
Yeah.
And
continue to have it,
and
right?
Continue
you
to
don't
have
ever
it.
outgrow being taught.
No. And that's why you want to learn from that instruction, right?
Yeah.
So you want to try to be humbled in a way that you don't forget that, although we do, because we're humans.
Yeah.
That's good. And so I want to ask you a question, Aaron. So obviously this podcast, the whole basis of it is being a strong dad, but I think there's a lot that goes into just being a strong man. And I'm sure you can attest to this. In my profession, there's a lot of negativity that goes on, whether it be whether the guys that I work with, and I'm sure you can attest to some of that as well. So you as a man of faith, and you as a predominant figure, in the role in your profession, how do you keep your faith ingrained in you at work?
Well, I think it's important, I try to every day spend some time reading the Bible and praying.
Sure.
And it's actually, with technology, in ways it's easier. I mean, you got the YouVersion app. You can go and read a verse of the day at least. And I think it's important to take that time.
Yeah.
And that hasn't always been the case, but that's why things have happened in my life that have kept pointing me in that direction. That's an important component, like working out physically,
Sure.
and that's an important component as well.
Yeah.
And so I think that, because my faith has got me through the most difficult times in my life. I didn't struggle like horribly like I've seen some people struggle when I lost my parents, because they had taught me so well. Because I lost both my parents. I lost my mom like 15 months after my dad.
Wow.
So, but they had taught me so strong, myself and my sister, in our faith, that we knew this was just part of it.
Yeah.
And I was back in school a week after my dad died, just plugging away, because I knew that's what he'd want me to do.
Yeah.
And so that over the years, whenever things have gotten difficult, you go back to your faith, and so then you learn that that's something you need to keep strong.
Yeah.
And at work, you want to be cognizant of other people's views, but that's why you just set an example that you hope that someone may then ask you, hey, well, why is it?
Sure.
And you feel this way, and then sometimes it comes up among other people. You got to be a little careful, especially in a government role, that you don't want to offend anyone to the point that it could be a problem, because there's a lot of rules around that.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so you have to be sensitive to that, but you can be sensitive to that, and I mean, even the Bible counsels to do it in a kind and gentle way.
Yeah.
And so I think you follow that example.
Yeah, I think sometimes the Christians get, and maybe rightfully so, they get the rap that they're judging everyone.
Hypocrites.
And it's like, this is our extension of our faith is really, as you said, through how we treat people and how we work with people and how we show love. And I love your testimony there about you have every reason. Your parents dying, you're 20 years old, your parents dying 15 months apart. You have every reason to say, screw the world, this all sucks, this is miserable, and go down a road that many have chosen, all right? But the idea that you had a strong rudder in the water due to your faith speaks largely of why we're Christians.
Right.
Not so that we can judge somebody, but so that we can pull strength, right?
Exactly. And I think actually, as you become stronger in your faith, you judge less, because that's the whole point, right?
Yeah.
And then you make mistakes and you realize, well, I need to. So I think over the years I've become a lot. When you're youth, you can get fired up and be quick to judge.
Yeah.
But I think as you get older, you realize what everyone's struggling with and where they're coming from, and I think you're more understanding, because at the end of the day, we're commanded to love everyone, and so that judgment can get in the way of that. And I think sometimes that gets misconstrued by the media and by others, that we think we're great because we're Christian. Quite the contrary, we think we're horribly flawed. That's why we're really pleased with the Christian message. Is it teaches us to love one another and to show grace and to show mercy, but also, to try to work to the standard that Jesus would want.
Well, you had mentioned earlier about you have high expectations for your sons, knowing full well that they're going to disappoint,
Correct.
right? They're not going to live up to those. And so much of this criminal thing that we talk about, and incarceration and the deterioration of what I always refer to the fabric, of our culture, is are we doing things that will be sustainable and are going to build generationally? And that's the raising of the bar, right? I'm shooting for a high expectation, knowing full well we're going to mess up. But just because I mess up doesn't mean I say, oh, well, it's never going to work. Just like marriage, our expectation is that we're married for life, and I'm going to love to the end, right? But knowing full well that there are going to be days that,
Right.
It's just not working well, right?
Right.
And thankfully, my wife is a forgiving person, right? Because my butt would have been out the door. But still keeping expectation, and that's where I think we get into trouble as Christians with being that expectation we have. People take it as a judgment on them, and it's like, no, this is really about you set the expectation because it's what's best for our culture, and the criminal system it really indicates that it's in a poor state because what we're doing can't sustain itself. So.
Absolutely, and I mean, you have to have the high expectations. The accountability component is as important as the mercy component, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if we don't hold, you just look at what we've done where we've said, oh, we had the wrong people in jail, and we changed the laws, and we lowered all the penalties. That didn't work really well.
Right.
In 2009, California, now every state and even the federal government has followed this kind of crime reduction plan under the idea that our incarceration rates were too high and we had the wrong people in jail and prison. And the fact is we didn't. We had people who were either violent or chronic offenders.
Yeah.
So we had the right people in prison. We may not have had the right programs in place to keep them from coming in prison, and we may not have had enough programs on the way out to keep them from going back. That is a valuable use of resources, but just, a quick fix, we're going to change the laws and say we have the wrong people in prison when we didn't.
Yeah.
And that's where the problem is, because if you hold people accountable, and then, I can tell you the number of people who came to me and said jail saved their life.
Yeah.
I run into them all the time. And, I was...
They don't want to say that when they're in jail, right?
No,
or when they're getting sentenced.
But if they got the help, and that's one of the things in Dearborn County we have that jail chemical addiction program, if they can get the help they need to get the skill sets as they're leaving jail, whatever that entails, I think, then jail does save their life.
Yeah.
And, I had a mom call me one time. Her kid was addicted to heroin. She called and she said, what can I do? And I couldn't refer to a program because we didn't have that kind of program that I could just say, here, send them here.
Yeah.
So I said, well, tell me your facts. And she had enough information that she could call the police and get him thrown in jail. We got him thrown in jail. He went to the jail chemical addiction program, became part of the drug court here, and Dearborn County has a lot of resources to that end. And I ran into him several years later at a Subway. I didn't even know what he looked like. And he walked up to me and said, you don't know me, this is what happened. I just want you to know that saved my life. He said, I've been 3 years clean and sober. And so those are the types of things that can happen if we have the right things in place. But accountability, the expectations, is a strong component of it.
Right.
And I'll never forget, I use this because it's powerful. Proverbs, I think it's 12:1 says, those who love discipline, those who love knowledge, those who hate correction are stupid. So, that's pretty strong
You're
words.
looking at me like that, Aaron.
That's pretty strong words that indicate that accountability and it does work.
Yeah.
And if it's so given the source, I think that's some advice that we can follow and not get away from this idea that where we give out needles to address the problem. They're now talking about safe injection sites as a place that people can use drugs. So we're going to let government enable behavior that is hugely detrimental, because I haven't met the heroin addict yet who, while they're using, is a good father, good mother, good provider. They're not doing any of those things well. And in fact, a lot of times we can point to abuse. The methamphetamine, which is now significantly on the rise, you know, like 7 of 10 people, like 70% of children in the homes of a meth user are sexually abused. I mean, these are not things where society puts it off as if it's a harmless, and they're not hurting anyone else, but they are. They're committing crimes. They're stealing to provide for the penalty. They're driving and operating impaired. They're neglecting or abusing their children, or both. And we sit there and say, we shouldn't be holding these people accountable in jail. No, we should absolutely be holding these people accountable with the idea to help them. That's not a discompassionate thing to hold people accountable, but then also extend, what can we do to get them on the right path?
I love that, because let's not change the expectation, right? The accountability. But as you said, where we have probably not done the best, and again, this should not be a government thing or solely a government thing. How about on the front side of incarceration and on the back side of incarceration? On the front side, that's why we're talking about strong dads. That's why we're talking about family. You know, that is, if we can do anything that's going to drop the incarceration rate, it's to bring back strength in family.
Absolutely.
And again, that's not going to drop the numbers in jail next week.
No.
Okay, that's part of the problem, and we get into that like, well, what can we do right now? This is a very much a long-term thing, but until we get that front end right, you can pull all the tricks you want while guys are in jail to reduce numbers or increase numbers. That's, but I'm right with you. We don't need to change the expectation. I wouldn't change the expectation for my own children.
Right.
Just because he's misbehaving, I wouldn't look at him and say, well, you know, it's just part of his behavior. I'm going to go ahead and let him continue to misbehave. No, I would do everything I can to say, well, we're going to have to alter what we do to prevent the misbehaving, because it's not going to win well in the future for you. So, what a great point. Well, Aaron, we have got to wrap it up. Thank you so much for your time here. Appreciate what you bring to the field. And we also just appreciate the idea that you're working in a government world, but you have a strong root in your faith that allows you to pull from that. And so no matter the education that you have from schools and college and all that, if you're not grounded in a faith such as you are, you can be flipped to the latest what's hot trend, can't you?
Absolutely.
So, all right. Let's go ahead and wrap this up.
Heck yeah.
Kyle, I thank you for coming in.
Aaron, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here.
And we will be tuning in or listening to this show here with many other guests coming up in the future. If you like what you are hearing with Strong Dads, please feel free to contact me at hutch@rocksolidfamilies.org. We appreciate all support that you guys can give us. If you have a particular program idea or guests that you would like to send our way because you think they're a great example of a strong dad, you can also contact me at hutch@rocksolidfamilies.org, and we'd love to hear from you and appreciate very much your listening. So get out there and be a strong dad.